Hey folks, I'm Pastor Joseph from Culpeper Presbyterian Church. Welcome back to our Lenten devotional series on wisdom. Last week we looked at Song of Songs chapter 3 as something other than an allegory for the relationship between God and the covenant community. We also talked about how in the Presbyterian tradition there is no separation between the sacred and the secular. Everything is under the sovereignty of God, even intimate romantic moments. We've reached the point in this series where wisdom literature begins to challenge other parts of Scripture. I am certain that questions will rise up as a result of this study. And I want to encourage all y'all to share any questions you may have, both with your small group and with me. You can also leave a comment on our YouTube channel if you're not currently attached to a Bible study group. Our passage for today is Ecclesiastes chapter 6, verse 10 through chapter 7, verse 4. And I invite you to pause the video to read it together with your group. And although I recommend the Common English Bible, the New Revised Standard Version, or the Tanakh translation for this project, you're welcome to use any translation you like. Comparing different translations is a great way to gain greater insight into Scripture. Once you've read that passage together, take some time while the music plays to meditate on it and to doodle or make notes as you respond to the questions in your devotional booklet. If wisdom literature in its broadest sense is about observing creation to learn about the Creator, then Ecclesiastes represents the farthest boundary of what humans can discern. Authorship of this book is attributed in chapter 1 to Koholeth, which means gatherer, convener, or assembler. Traditionally, because he's also described as both a king and David's son, that has pointed towards Solomon. Ecclesiastes in its current form, however, dates much later than the reign of King Solomon. It sets a sharp counterpoint to the beauty and value of wisdom that is described in Proverbs and Song of Songs. It describes wisdom and knowledge as sources of aggravation and pain, and that most human pursuits are pointless exercises in vanity. One commentator sums up the distinction, saying, Proverbs connects life with wisdom and righteous behavior, death with folly and wickedness. Ecclesiastes, however, does not see any moral distinction between right and wrong, no connection between how one lives and how one dies. God, the world, and nature itself are completely indifferent to human existence. This is counter-testimony. It offers a different perspective on what the Lord is doing in the world than other parts of Scripture do. And while human actions do have consequences, these consequences are provisional. They're not the final word. The Lord has the ultimate authority to override our action and to maintain creation however God chooses. In other words, God does not only bless the righteous and punish the wicked. Sometimes good things happen to bad people, and sometimes bad things happen to good people. Ecclesiastes is grappling with events in the real world which are beyond our ability to understand, and comes to the conclusion that trying to change our lot, trying to resist what God provides, is pointless. For Ecclesiastes, the world is what it is. Now, these statements are not only a judgment about human limitation, but also an assertion of the Lord's sovereign freedom. Ecclesiastes is the human pursuit of wisdom pushed to its limit. It lays other parts of wisdom literature in the tomb, having reached their logical end. Our reading for today takes the same style of many of the Proverbs, but Ecclesiastes' observations come to very different conclusions. Rather than seeking happiness and life, as other parts of wisdom literature do, Ecclesiastes looks forward to death and seeks the wisdom of sorrow. Two reasons are given for the Ecclesiastes' preference for sorrow, and they cut right to the heart of the book. Death is the end for everyone, and true joy is found only through sorrow. At the end of a pursuit of wisdom, death is the only remaining experience left to be studied. And because happiness is only happenstance, true joy can only emerge from grief and sorrow. And when I preach on a particular passage, one of the questions I ask is, how is this passage good news? And there's not a lot in the Bible that makes that question more difficult to answer than Ecclesiastes. And so I ended up looking at Ecclesiastes as a way of taking apart our fantasies about the world as we'd like it to be. We cannot afford to ignore the realities of life in a broken world. And although we all look forward to a time when sorrow will come to an end, either when Christ returns or when we pass from death to life eternal, we live here now. And we have to contend with the messiness of a world that is unpredictable and sometimes unfair. It is beyond our ability to fix all the sorrows of the world. It is beyond our ability to resist death, although we can delay it for a time. Ecclesiastes teaches that it is pointless and foolish to think that we can. Ecclesiastes instead recommends a kind of Christian existentialism, that we submit ourselves to the sovereignty of the Lord our God and make meaningful lives with the time that we have, turning sorrow into a glad heart where we can, so that on the day of our death, our obituary will be a testimony that not even death can contend with God. There's a lot to talk about in Ecclesiastes, and this conversation is just the beginning. We don't have to answer all of the questions. In fact, Ecclesiastes teaches us that some questions don't have satisfactory answers, but they're still worth asking. I think because the process of asking them brings us into closer relationship with God, even if they don't give us a clearer understanding of God. I'm going to turn things over to your small group leader so that y'all can continue this conversation among yourselves. Remember that I'm eager to hear any questions y'all have, so either reach out to me or leave a comment here so that the conversation can continue even after this video ends. Ecclesiastes might be wisdom's tomb, but we all know the story doesn't end in the tomb.